Alright, we are on. Hey everybody, welcome back. Right now we are going to go over section 3 and why man looks old though nature gives him a new body every year. And this is our book, How to Stay Young. Oh man, I just had a brain fart really quick. We're going to go over chapter 3 right now. We're 29 pages in, and I have my brain faves playing there. It's a playlist I made of brainwave music, and I only have 11 tracks on there, so if we make it through all 11 songs and it replays, then it replays. So that being said, let's go ahead and let's get started. Why man looks old, though nature gives him a new body every year. There are two reasons why the personal man, after reaching what is termed middle life, begins to look older and older in appearance every year. The one is ossification, and the other is old age conditions. Now remember, ossification is the process of solidifying. You know, it's less susceptible to change, and the other is old age conditions. The tendency of the human body to ossify is produced by various causes, some physical and some mental. Though all of these causes, in their last analysis, have their origin in certain abnormal modes of mental life, a mental activity. It's talking about the metaphysical part of man. And remember in the last chapters how we were talking about metaphysical healing, the power of positive thought over the body, that even if the body starts to feel not so good, a positive thought has the power to what do you call? What's this word? To zap it, to zap that feeling of being bad, because it's all in thought. Remember how the body reacts from the thoughts by creating endorphins, by releasing hormones inside the bloodstream, creating a chemical feeling within the body. When the cells of the fibers of the body begin to ossify, begin to harden, the muscles will harden, the bones will become stiff, the various organs will become heavy and sluggish, and the shriveling up process will pervade more and more the entire system. Reconstruction and repair will be retarded. Waste matter will increase in the system and will soon begin to clog the system because the various organs are too sluggish to perform their proper functions. When the cells of the brain begin to ossify, they will respond less and less to the actions of the mind. The intellect will become less and less lucid, and memory will gradually wane. New impressions are formed in mind with difficulty, usually not at all. The acquisition of new knowledge becomes almost impossible as the brain is no longer a perfect, responsive instrument upon which the mental faculties may act. Now again, if you haven't been with us in part 6 of the Master Key System, I encourage you to check it out. Charles F. Hannell explains in clear, concise detail on how the brain is the perfect instrument which has been created for the mind of man. That we wouldn't have the brain we have unless we have the mind that we have. The fact that, quote, old people, end quote, remember more readily what occurred in their childhood than what occurred in recent years is in this connection simply explained. The impressions formed upon the mind in childhood were deep and penetrating because the brain was then in a plastic condition. Later impressions, however, scarcely produced any impression because the brain had become too hard. That the impressions gained in childhood should be vivid while the impressions of recent years are hardly perceptible is therefore evident. Meaning that as the older person, the reason why they remember their childhood years more is because their experiences of their childhood years are already ossified within their brain. It's already an experience that they've had and they remember clearly. But as they get older and the brain gets more ossified and the thought process of the individual begins to weaken and they slow down, then the individual the impressions of recent years are hardly perceptible of the individual. They're not going to remember their most recent experiences as easily and as readily as they remember their old, already engraved memories. The same phenomena explains why a number of old people who have left the beliefs of childhood return to those beliefs in their declining years. When the brain becomes so ossified that clear, penetrating, comprehensive thinking becomes difficult or impossible, the mind can discern only those ideas that are deeply impressed, and naturally can believe only that which it can discern. And as the deepest impressions are always those impressions that are formed in childhood, that is, in the minds of those who permit ossification to take place, the beliefs of childhood are the only beliefs that old ossified brains can understand. It makes me wonder, since this really has been the longest thing I really do remember doing, next to fitness, it makes me wonder if that's the reason why, doing things like this, it always just comes back to me, and because, like I said, I've been studying this since immediately after high school. Actually, before I was even done with high school, I was even reading I got into it when I was 18, 19. I didn't graduate high school until I was 19. It makes me wonder that just the fact that I had started something like this so soon, early on in my age, that I had built those deep grooves within my mind, even if I wasn't conscious that that's what I was doing. That sounds to me that is exactly what has happened. Let's go ahead and move on. The fact that, quote, old people, end quote, frequently return to their earlier ideas proves nothing for or against those ideas. It only proves that ossified brains are too dull to discern other than the deepest impressions in the mind, and those impressions are usually the ones gained in childhood. And that is why they say it is in childhood where all the habits that must be built for the construction of man must be built at an early age. When the mind is a blank slate, it's completely receptive to being molded and fashioned in any way. And that's why it's so important. If you have a kid that is young and hasn't yet grown to the point where he has his own consciousness yet, where he can't think for himself yet, his subconscious is open to impressions of all kind, whether it's from the TV that's playing, whether it's the voices that you, the words that you speak, what his environment is doing, the actions that you guys are dictating. This child in his mind is absorbing every single thing that's going on around him. It's going to have an impression on who he becomes when he's older. Of course, it's not going to determine who he is when he's older. He will have that choice ultimately. When the old people become childish, the cause is the same. Their brains are too dull to be influenced by the wiser ideas of later years. Such brains discern only the deep impressions of childhood and are influenced by the nature of those impressions, and consequently become childish both in thought and action. The impressions of childhood are not always the deepest and most vivid impressions. However, if the brain is just as plastic as 60 as 10, the impressions formed at the one period may be just as deep as at the other. But in the average person, the brain begins to ossify at 50, sometimes at 40, or even 35. Minds that are highly developed will form their deepest impressions after the half-century mark has been passed, providing the ossifying process does not enter the brain. It is therefore evident that those minds that are constantly being developed and that never permit the brain to ossify will do their best work later in life. In fact, the nearer they approach the century mark, the more remarkable will their work become. The fact that ossification can be prevented, not only in the brain but in the entire human system, is therefore a tidings of great joy, especially to those who wish to live a life worthwhile and accomplish something worthwhile. The second reason why man looks old through nature, gives him a new body every year, is found in old age conditions. These conditions are purely mental, and are produced principally by the conscious or subconscious belief in age. Now, one reason that I can say that he says that is because of the fact that we become what we think about, and we externalize the thoughts of which we are thinking. We externalize the mindset of which we are currently carrying. Remember, our thoughts, our mental states will project and outpicture themselves in the external world. And that is why conditions of old age conditions are purely mental and are produced principally by the conscious or subconscious belief in age. To believe that you are growing older and older every year, and to positively expect to look older and older every year, these conditions will cause the new cells that have just been formed to take on an old appearance, and thus the new body will look as old as you think you are, regardless of the fact that the new body has been in existence less than a year. The old age conditions will bear the stamp of your thought of yourself. The old age conditions will bear the stamp of your thought of yourself, because they are the product of your thought of yourself. Therefore, if you have lived upon this planet for 50 years and think that you ought to look just as a 50-year-old people are supposed to look, you will create old age conditions that have the 50-year-old stamp, and your new body will be stamped by this old age. The new body will be so permeated with 50-year-old conditions that it will feel like 50 and look like 50. It is all false, however. There is not a cell or a fiber in your system that is over a year old. The majority are less than 3 months old, therefore cannot look as if they were 50 unless they were changed artificially by some false mental process. The fact that the actions of the mind can change the appearance of the body is thoroughly demonstrated whether a person worries or indulges in similar mental states. A few hours of worry will cause the person to look 10. Now, what were we talking about earlier when you're stressing on things? That if you're stressing and you're thinking negative thoughts about things, then your body responds to that by releasing. Your brain will release cortisol within the bloodstream. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And this cortisol, as it enters the bloodstream, it then circulates throughout the entire body, reaching every single cell in your body. And this is the stress hormone. This is causing stress to your body. Then what may we not accept from a lifetime of constant old age producing thought? The power of thought is creative, and the conditions that are produced by thought are similar to the nature of the thought itself. Therefore, to constantly think year after year that you are growing older and older is to fill the system with conditions that will impress the appearance of more and more age upon every fiber and cell of the system. The new cells that are formed in your body today will be caused by these old age conditions. To look as old as you think you are today, next year you will think you are a year older, and the age conditions that are constantly being evolved from your mentality will cause you to feel a year older, and the entire body will look a year older. To think that you are growing older or to accept or to expect to grow old sometime in the future is to form old age conditions in the mentality. Therefore, no thought whatever must be given to old age or the age-producing process in any of its forms. Now, with that being said, I really do strongly encourage you to go over the Master Key System with us, as Charles F. Hannell explains everything that he just talked about right now. Charles F. Hannell explains into complete scientific detail as to the reality of our thoughts, that we become what we think about, and that when we concentrate and when we focus our conscious mind on a specific task, and we always have that picture within our in front of us, you can say, and there's nothing that we're not going to be able to accomplish. The only thing that's keeping us from making that happen is the failure to believe that we can do it, and then the actual actions, the process of taking the actions to make something like that happen. To think that you are growing older or to expect to grow old sometime in the future is to form old age conditions in the mentality. Therefore, no thought whatever must be given to old age or the age-producing process in any of its forms. And also to add on to that, when he's saying to form old age conditions in the mentality, in the mind, Charles F. Hannell explains that consciousness is the substance, the structure of what our mind is composed of, and that even the substance of our mind changes and structures itself in accordance with the nature of our own thought. Mind itself is a substance that just is. But when we think, that's when we're creating it to be a specific structure. We're creating our own mental home, and that mental home is going to, like we've mentioned many times already, it's going to outpicture itself into the external world. The chemical processes of the body, the vital processes of the functional system, the conscious processes of the brain and the nervous system, in brief, all the processes of the personality obey the ruling tendency of the mind, absolutely. The mind can, either through direct or indirect action, modify all the natural processes in the human system. Now going back to what we said before, remember the power the conscious mind has over the subconscious. This process that perpetuates youth can be neutralized by the adverse conditions of mind. And this is what the average mind is doing. To learn to stay young, therefore, it is necessary to change the mind completely on this most important subject. The color of your hair changes with the passing of the years because it is a race habit to grow gray as you are growing old. It is a tendency that every person inherits from the race, but the time of its actions varies among different persons to a considerable degree. This variation is produced principally by personal habits and environments, and occasionally by exceptional conditions of mind or body. The tendency to change the color of the hair was originally produced by adverse mental states, the result of which was intensified by repetition. The longer the person lived, the more he worried, the more he grieved, and the more he misdirected the efforts of mind, thought, or action. And as these continued to change the color of the hair more and more, man came to look upon the change as the result of age. Finally, it became a race habit, but it is well to remember that all habits can be removed. To dwell a great deal in wrong mental states will tend to change the color of the hair before the race tendency we have inherited begins to produce the change. And to continue to dwell in wrong mental states after this tendency has begun to act will increase the power of this tendency. This is why some people grow gray early in life, and why others grow gray very rapidly when they once begin. In the presence of the fact that the entire body is constantly renewed, it seems difficult for some minds to understand why scars, tumors, artificial growths, etc. continue to appear in the same place, and frequently in the same form, year after year. But this is a matter that is simply explained. Now before we move on, because he's obviously going to give us an example of this in motion, the fact that a lot of the conditions, if not all the conditions of the body, are the result of a person's mental state. And that is something that the New Thought movement teaches, that it is the mind state, that is, metaphysical healing is something that is possible by the power of positive thinking and the positive belief of a person. And when you enter a specific state of vibration in accordance with the nature of your thoughts, what is happening within you is not only going to manifest itself on the outside, but it's going to create the conditions within your own body as well. Now, psycho-cybernetics, John C. Maxwell, I believe it's John C. Maxwell. No, I think John C. Maxwell might be the man who wrote the leadership books. But Maxwell, his last name is Maxwell, but he wrote psycho-cybernetics, and he talks about that. What does he talk about? Mental states, gray rapidly, the entire body constantly removed. Tumors. That's what growths, a water growth. He goes over this lady had a growth and she had it removed. she went to the hospital. They removed it. They did a surgical procedure to have it removed. And a few weeks to a month later, the growth came back. And they're trying to explain the process of why this growth happened. That even if the lady changed, you know, the actual physical portion of it, you know, she had surgery to get the growth removed. The growth came back because she didn't get rid of the actual cause of the growth. And the cause of the growth was in her own thoughts. It was inside of her. And what was ever happening inside of her was destroying and creating all of these negative conditions within her body, which was causing the disease, or the tumor, which had been created inside of her. And that's very interesting too, because they also go over the placebo effect, that they could have they had an experiment that they had a group of three groups of people. One group, they used the placebo effect. They gave them a sugar pill, told them it was an actual real medication, and that it was going to help them with their condition. The other group was the actual real pill, and the third group, they just didn't, they didn't really do anything with them. They looked at the third group that had the conditions, the ones that they didn't really do anything with, and they were just watching to see how things reacted. Just the process of what happens when a person's not taking a supplement and when a person's not trying to heal it themselves. At least through their consciousness anyway. The second group was taking the medications. They got healed. Some of them developed something else, from whatever side effects that come from whatever medications they've had. And then the last group that we're going to talk about is with the placebo effect, that they gave them a sugar pill and they told them that it was the actual medicine, and they believed that it was the actual medicine. But these people got better. Why did they get better? Even if they didn't take the pill, that was actually the pill. They ended up getting better was because of their belief that they're getting better. Their subconscious mind that naturally works to heal the body, the fact that they believed that they were going to get better allowed this process to happen naturally, instead of, like we were mentioning in the last chapter, when a person is constantly interfering with the process of natural self-healing by their failure to recognize that their body already heals itself. They're continuously, their thoughts are interfering with the natural process that their subconscious is already trying to do. Man, that sounded like a big mess right now. I hope I didn't confuse you guys anymore. I know explaining in the last chapter, it sounded so much more clear. Let's go ahead and move on. Every cell in the human body is produced by an individual chemical action, and this action has its root in the subconscious life of the body. To change the form or the nature of the cell, this chemical action must first be changed, and this is possible through the use of the method that will affect the subconscious root or cause of that action. And if we look at what causes the tendency of the subconscious to grow as they do, it is thought. It is possible, however, not only to change the subconscious cause of any chemical action along the line of ordinary development, but it is also possible to produce unnatural chemical actions. This frequently occurs both through external agencies and through conditions that arise wholly within the system itself. When any part of the body is cut, the chemical actions within the cells that are affected are so shocked that they become unnatural actions. These unnatural actions will tend to produce cell structures similar to the cut through which they had their origin. That is, they will tend to produce and perpetuate a scar. Nature, however, always aims to remove unnatural chemical actions, and when it succeeds, the scar finally disappears. Sometimes it succeeds only in modifying the false action, while at other times it fails, the reason being that the unnatural chemical action has become so thoroughly individualized and so firmly established that nature cannot remove it without assistance. Artificial growths in the body are produced by unnatural chemical actions that have become individualized. These particular actions usually have their origin in disease conditions within the system, and they will continue to produce the artificial growth until nature can remove them. If nature fails, other agencies, either physical or metaphysical, will be required to reestablish normal conditions. The fact that every chemical action, both natural and unnatural, has its origin in the subconscious life. Has its origin. Okay, what else? Has its origin in the subconscious life. Okay, let me go ahead and read that sentence again. The fact that every chemical action, both natural and unnatural, has its origin in the subconscious life, gives extreme importance to that phase of metaphysics through which the subconscious may be changed and reconstructed in any manner desired. Since the subconscious can do whatever it is properly directed to do, any false chemical action, and in consequence, any artificial growth in the system, can be removed by those who know how to direct the subconscious. The law of perpetual renewal will renew all the cells in the system, whether these cells are the expressions of natural chemical actions or not. But the new cells will, in each case, have the same form and nature as the old ones, because the same causes always produce the same effects. An artificial growth in the system will renew itself just as readily as an organ in the system, but the new cells in the artificial growth will be similar to the old ones, because they are all produced by the same unnatural chemical action. And that unnatural chemical action is brought into existence by the wrong mental habits. An artificial growth that is growing will multiply cell structures, though through the same law that multiplies cell structures in a growing muscle. But each individual cell will be similar to the cell that preceded so long as the individual chemical action remained unchanged. Meaning, so as long as there is no change in the chemical reactions, the new cells will rebuild themselves as the way they were. But if once there is a change, then that new cell will rebuild itself to the changed chemical action. It has to. There is no other way. If there's no chemicals involved in the body at that point in time, how else is the cell going to be able to generate itself from anything else? An artificial growth that is growing multiplies cell structures through the same law that multiplies cell structures in a growing muscle. But each individual cell will be similar to the cell that preceded so long as the individual chemical reactions remain unchanged. When these actions change, the efforts of nature simply or in the efforts of nature singly. This is one of those what are they called, typos, things that are hard to read. One of the bad copying that they mentioned at the beginning of this book. Efforts of nature, I think it says singly, or in cooperation with external assistance. That doesn't exactly sound right, though. Why? The individual actions remain unchanged. When these actions change, the efforts of nature singly, they're missing an E, in the cooperation or in cooperation with external assistance are responsible. Okay, so whether it's doing it on its own or it has the help of something external are responsible. Okay, now that makes sense. How amazing that just one word, one letter from a word can completely throw off how a mind perceives a word. And then, yeah, go figure. And it completely changes the what could be being said in a sentence. That is why reading, you have to as Wallace D. Waddell says, it's not about what you read, but by what you think about what you read. And as Charles F. Hannell says, that all possession is based on consciousness. that it deals and lives within the mind. It all is in the mind. Excuse me. The hiccups. To those who understand the nature of the human organism, it is evident that the law of perpetual renewal is ceaselessly at work rebuilding everything, both the natural and the unnatural, and the personality of man. Everything in the human system is always new, therefore should never look old, and never would look old if ossification and old age conditions were not produced in the being of man. Nature, however, does not produce these two causes of the aging process. They are both produced by the mistakes of man, and he himself can completely remove them. When man removes the process of ossification from his physical system, and removes every age-producing thought from his mental system, he will have mastered the art of staying young, for he will no longer be bowed down by those things on each side of the spectrum, by keeping him from advancing to the best that he can be on both the natural side of who he is and the mind side of who he is, the physical and the metaphysical part of what we are. Great minds have for some time realized that the perpetuation of youth would be possible if ossification could be overcome, and have searched diligently for that strange chemical that, seemingly without reason, hardens the cells of the system with the passing of the years. Their failure to find it, however, is due wholly to the fact that we cannot understand the secret processes of life until chemistry is combined with metaphysics. Their failure to find it, however, is due wholly to the fact that we cannot understand the secret processes of life until chemistry, the physical aspect, the man, the body, is combined with metaphysics, the mind, the mental, the thought portion of man. The cause of ossification is partly physical, partly mental, and partly hereditary. Hereditary meaning it was something that has been given you. It has come through something you received through a natural reproduction, natural evolution. And these various phases of the subject will be analyzed thoroughly in succeeding chapters. But in our effort to remove the process of ossification, we must not forget to hold in mind that attitude where old age conditions of thought are eliminated completely, meaning that in order to all we need to do to diminish ossification was in the mind is to believe that to know that old age doesn't exist, that there is no age in mind, that there's only intelligence, and that the more intelligent a mind becomes, then the more real, I guess you can say, a mind would be. It will not be possible for man to perpetuate his youth, no matter what methods he may employ, so long as he believes in the reality of the inevitableness of age. To live in the belief that age must come in mentality, is to mentally create the age-producing process. Remember, by creating that mental image, always see yourself as being young, healthy, vibrant, and alive. Because your thoughts will go out and you will be surrounded by your own thoughts made into material things due to the law of attraction. And to create or perpetuate that process is to fill the system with old age conditions, and we will look as old as we think we are, regardless of the fact that our present body has been in existence but for a few short months. To fix a future time for the coming of age is to impress the idea of age upon the mind, and to impress the idea of age upon the mind is to impress conditions of age upon the cells of the body. We are receiving from nature perpetual youth now. To live in that youth now is to retain that youth now. And as there is no end to the eternal now, there can be no end to the youth of the eternal now. The future will care for itself if we care well for the present. And to be true to the present, we must be true to ourselves in the present. We must be what we are now, and we are young now. To think at any time of the possibility of future age is to create age-producing thoughts. And this is to create that thought. Hold on. Let me reread that. To think at any time of the possibility of future age is to create age-producing thought. It is to create that thought now that has no place in life now. It is to bring age into the present when there is no age in the present. The present body is young. It is this year's product. It is new and ought to look new, but man thinks he is old because he has lived upon earth 60 or more years, and he lives within his mind. Even though the body is not even a year old yet, they've experienced 60 plus years of life in their mind. And this experience produces thoughts of old age, that an individual is getting old, but science shows that the body is no more than a year old on average. He therefore feels as old as people are supposed to feel at 60, and the body will always look as old as the mind feels. The body always is young, and will look young as long as the mind feels young. This is the great secret. I'm grasping more and more of it now. And when he says how to stay young, it's not about looking young or anything as such, but about being young in thought, in mind, and to understand that we are growing. Age is not that growing old is not a reality. That growing old is only an idea that we had created within our own mind due to our failure to understand that the body is completely, entirely new. The song is called Golden Wings. It's by Bag Raiders. When I was 21 years old is when I found this song. You know, when you're 21 years old, you definitely like to imagine yourself just as unstoppable. How cool is it? How cool would it be if we had golden wings? You know, we might not have them physically. But if you could become somebody that could help the world become themselves, their real self, you're already gold, man. That is the end of Chapter 3 on a man. When a man learns to be himself, he will stay young automatically. I want to read you the exact title of that chapter. That was Why Man Looks Old Though Nature Gives Him a New Body Every Year. Man, was I wrong about the title that I thought we were on. I was remembering us still being back at number 2, that when man learns to be himself, he will stay young without trying. Oh well, it was an honest mistake. I'm a human. We make him. That being said, thank you so much if you made it to this video. Thank you so much for watching. There's a lot of information that we're going over. I know it could be a little much to take in at first, but I encourage you to keep trying. Do your best to keep learning. This is the future of the new thought. This is the future of the global consciousness, and we want to be a part of that change, and we want to be the ones that help implement that change. That being said, I'll see you guys on the other side of the galaxy. I'm going to go ahead and do a few of my things today. I need to go to the gym. I need to take care of my body. I need to exercise. I need a lot of other things I need to do to get done as of right now too. And when I have the time again, I will see you guys on the other side of the galaxy. And we're going to go over chapter 4. So that being said, take care, and I will see you.